Hey, Julie, thanks so much for joining me on Window Treatments for Profit today.
Hi, LuAnn. Thrilled to be here.
It's fun for me to see you not in the WCAA board meeting Zoom, right? Usually that's how we see each other mostly, right?
And we're a tiny little square. I have a nice big square to look at. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. So you joined the WCAA board is what, about a year and a half ago now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Close to that. Year and
But
few
you're
months for
probably a
sure.
longtime member of WCAA, right?
I have been. I've been a member, I want to say since 2007.
Mm.
I don't since, and we can get into this a little bit later, but since I bought my current business, I don't get to the local chapter meetings as much as I would like to. I try to send one of my employees to go just
Okay.
to represent and see what's going on, and but that's it's just very far away from where we are in
Oh.
the time of day, and trying to leave Boston to get there. It's just really a difficult thing.
Yeah, 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 but the thing is we've got all the recordings of the different learnings and stuff and the webinars
Correct.
that happen every month and all of that to take advantage of, and then, of course, you're always going to the IWCE. I don't know, have you started to go to the Sun Shading, Expo too, or no?
I have not yet. Next year,
Okay.
it's on my agenda for next year.
Yeah,
Yes,
next year in
yes,
2025, I think it's gonna be in Indianapolis.
yes,
Have you
yes.
been to Indianapolis
I have
before?
not. I
Oh
have
my
not.
gosh. I went there for the first time. Steve Burston, you know Steve Burston,
Yes,
was the
yes.
founder of Exciting Windows. When he passed away, they had the memorial service in Indianapolis. And you're like, okay, I'm going to Indianapolis, whatever. What a beautiful city. I was like,
Really?
oh my God, I couldn't believe it was what I said was it felt like a mixture of Philadelphia and DC. It was like DC feels more open and spread out, but it had the charm of the cobblestones and the buildings like Old Town Philly. And it was like I said to Susie, who's one of the writers for our show, who lives in Indianapolis, and Vinny and I met her and her husband for dinner. And I said, it almost feels like a Disney movie set, like a movie set of an old time city. Like,
Funny. Did she agree? Could she relate
yeah,
to that? Oh, that's
yeah,
great then.
because it has all the historic charm, but it doesn't like look, I love Philly, right? But when you Philly and Boston is the same. It's like a combination of like that because but it's like the streets are little because they were made for like horse and buggy. They weren't
Yes,
made for
yes,
cars, all of it, right?
yes.
So, but yes, I'm looking forward to going to the Sunshade Expo out there. And first, we're going to 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, we're going to be out in Anaheim at Sunshade Expo. But next year in Indianapolis. Okay, so we're here to talk about you've been in business 18 years. And about 10 years ago, after spending 8 years as being a one person workroom, essentially, you decided to buy another larger workroom. And I'm assuming the owner of that workroom was retiring, or how did you come to know about it being available? And what was some of the decisions and things that you went through in making the choice to do it?
Sure. So yes, I was working out of my home from 2006 until I purchased Designer Draperies of Boston. Um, and the reason, what happened was I had four children. I was an occupational therapist. I got my master's in occupational therapy. I worked in rehab settings, did home care, did evaluations for Mass Health. And one of the nurses that I worked with doing those evaluations introduced me to the fact that a drapery workroom existed. I didn't know. I mean, I was making curtains and valances and this and that for friends and family for years. I had sewn since I was 10. And, she said that her husband's niece did it as a legitimate business out of her home. We scheduled an appointment to go see her. She had her three-car garage, her entire basement, three employees, all the things, all the fabric books, the hardware samples, the industrial machines. And I was just like, what is this? Talk about Disneyland. I felt like I was in Disneyland. And I went home to my husband and I said, I think this is what I want to do. And so he
Wow.
said, "Okay, go for it." Because I had a table, I had a lining rack that my brother-in-law had made for me years and years ago because I was cutting patterns out on the floor and this and that. So I just did not know that that existed. And so I kept doing my OT work like 2 days a week, and then just started sewing, and word spread. And taught a Roman shade class. My friend had a yarn store at the end of the street, and she also taught sewing classes and said, "Would you be willing to teach an adult how to make Roman class?" And I said, "Sure." So I did that one night a week, loved it. And then they got a call from an interior designer that said, "We're looking for someone to convert a king size duvet into a queen sized throw with some decorative edging. Could you do that for us?" And so they called me to see if I was interested. So that was my introduction to the first designer interaction that I had ever had. And then she
Wow.
said, "Do you know how to make drapery?" And I said, "Sure." And that's where it began. And then she referred me to a couple of people. And then I said, "Oh, I like this and this designer workroom relationship." Um, and that became my focus. So in 2008, my youngest was let's think in 2006, my youngest was 1. And then in 2013, when I started toying with moving out of my house, he was 8. And I said, "This is a good time for us to
Mm.
do this." And business just got so big that we had renovated my entire basement for the business, but we just were growing. I had another person working for me 3 days a week. We were banging into each other, moving bolts left and right to try to accommodate it. So we started to look at property to buy a building to open it up in. And then, I mean, I just really feel like it was all meant to be. The person that worked for me used to own a coffee shop, and she was speaking with this gentleman that she knew from the neighborhood, and he said, "Helen, what are you doing since you sold the mud house?" And she said, "Oh, I'm actually working for a woman in a drapery workroom." He said, "Do I have an opportunity for you?" She said, "Not interested, but Julie might be." She gave me the number. I called the owner. She wasn't quite ready to sell. She was toying with it, like she wanted to but hadn't done anything.
Okay.
So we met. I told her I was interested. It took about a year from 20, it was actually like August of 2013, and we signed the papers August 1st, 2014. It really legitimately took a year.
Yeah.
She had to gather all of her numbers. She didn't have anything electronic. All of her ledgers were like, pen and paper.
Mm.
So when my CPA started making requests for documents 10 years back, profit and loss, balance sheets, I mean, it was kind of work for him to kind of sort through it. But
Mm.
he encouraged me and said, she has a pretty good business here, and I think you have the potential to make it better and bigger if that's the direction you want to go. The purpose of it was A, to get out of my house, and B, to pay for college for my kids. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the goal, that was my why. And so that was it. And so on August 1st, 2014, I purchased it.
So let me just do a little clarification. So the first friend that mentioned her niece, that's not the business you bought. That was just the first time you
That was the
realized that
nurse.
somebody scaled it,
Yes,
right?
nurse
That it
I
was
was
like,
working with. Yes.
okay, because she
Yes,
had scaled
yes.
it to a bigger level, and it was the first time you visualized that that was a thing, that it wasn't just you and one part-time person. It was
Correct.
like people
Correct.
employed people to do this and, had multiple tables and machines and all of that.
And
Okay.
at that time, I didn't even have a workroom in my home. That was before 2006. That was before I was working with this nurse, and she introduced me to it because she knew that I was sewing. I had made something for her daughter, and then something clicked
Ah.
with her, and she introduced me to that world. And that's when I went home and said, "Wait a minute, I think this is what I want to do."
Oh, so
And
that was
opened,
the first
yes,
iteration where you were in
correct.
your own basement
Yes,
sewing yourself.
correct.
Okay.
Yes,
And then we fast forward 8 years later, this connection through the other friend
yes. Who was
is a
working
w
for me,
that
correct.
yes, and there's a business to be bought. Okay.
Yes, yes.
And that business had the location, or it was just the client list and the machinery that you were buying?
So no, she was located in South Boston. She had 1,500 square feet of space in this really cool old distillery. She had been there for 15 years, and she had 3 employees. So
Okay.
yes.
But when you
Yes.
bought it, you didn't stay in that space. You bought your own building, or no?
No,
You
I
went. You
stayed
stayed
there.
there. Okay. Okay.
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now I guess the thing is thinking back. It's
Mm.
funny because, of course, I know what we have to do to make our business sellable. And it sounds like that this woman really didn't do that. Okay. But thinking back to that year, all the things that took so long for your side and her side to be able to get the information with clarity so that you could, I guess, first assess what the business was worth so you could come up with a price. So, talking to your colleagues that own workrooms, and even if they're retailers, right? What are the things, like, she didn't keep her books organized, she didn't document costs, like she didn't document profit. What were the stick points that you probably are not making those mistakes in your business now, is my guess. You're just like, oh, not only you probably had your own things you knew to do, but it's like, oh, the things not to do that were the stick points along the way of keep clogging this up, right?
Yes, yes. That was one of them, was that, it really took my CPA quite a bit of time to, look through it for the consistency. She had a number in her brain, and her number was the one highest gross year that she
Oh,
had. And
sure.
that's what
That's a
she thought that
formula.
she was going to sell it for. And so that got shut down pretty quickly. And I'll be
Yeah.
honest, like, I had no idea, right?
Right.
I didn't know what I should or should not do. Um, but John, who's my CPA, said, her net profit at the
Yeah.
end of each year was very decent, and she was taking a salary. So those were two things that he wanted to make sure was, okay, great, this is her net profit, but was she taking a decent salary as
Right.
well? And she
Right.
was doing that. So that was great.
And just before you go on, I just want to stop there. Like when I do one on one coaching and when people come to us at Exciting Windows, it's one of the first questions we ask. It's, are you paying yourself? Right. And secondly, what is your net profits over the year? What are your gross sales and what are your net profits? Because that is how a business, that's one of the key factors, right, in determining the worth of a business. Because if your net profit is 25,000 a year and you're not taking a salary, well, then your business is worth about 25K.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? It's not, if you sold 5 million, but your profit margin is so low that you only realize 25,000. I mean, of course, that's ridiculous. Even somebody doesn't know what they're doing should realize more than that. But the idea is, it's not just what you sell. It's what you, the owner, what your take is. That usually is the first multiplier of what a business is worth as a sale price. But then we get into the mitigating factors of, is the business owner key critical or can walk away, right? Because you can make 200K, you can make 200K profit, but if the darn thing can't run, if you're not in the building, that's going to pull down that profit. That's going to pull down that sale price. I mean, right, Julie?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. Um, and, for me, I couldn't really, there weren't a whole lot of people. Like, I reached out to Michelle Williams while I
Mm.
was going through this procedure. I reached out to Janelle Deck because
Mm.
I had known them from going to the CHF Academy, and knew that they, were very savvy in
Sure.
this industry and successfully running their businesses. And, Janelle had owned a business, sold a business, so they were very helpful. But it was a lot of risk. Like,
Yeah.
what was I buying? It
What were
wasn't a
you buying? Right.
structure.
Right.
It was a leased
Right.
space. 3 employees. Were they going to stay? I couldn't
Right.
guarantee they were going to stay.
No. You're buying
Designers,
you're buying equipment and a
equipment,
client list.
inventory, and a client
And a
list.
client list,
And
which is also not guaranteed, but at least
absolutely.
depending on what size it is, right?
Correct. So part of what took some of the time too, and I don't regret it one moment, is that I required that I spent a lot of time with her,
Good
going
for you.
on measures, going on installations. At the time, the majority of her business was really out of like 3 or 4 interior designers, which is not the
Not
best
a good
business
model.
model to go
No.
by. So I requested like meetings with them, with the previous owner and myself, just to get a sense, were they ride and die fans of this owner? Had they
Right.
been, you know what I mean? Was their loyalty to her, or were they just happy? So my feeling was, and our personalities were very, very different, very different. Um, you know, I'm a friendly, outgoing person. She was very just quiet, went in, went out, might make a comment here or there, but whereas I think that the designers are hiring me for my knowledge and expertise, so I think it's my responsibility at a measure when the designer is there, if I think she's going in the wrong direction, to be like, have you thought that through? Like, what's
100%
the
agree.
reason? These are my concerns. So knowing that the profitability was there, and knowing that, what my personality was like, and some people may hate me, some people may love me, but it is what it is. But I know that I'm outgoing, and her approach was just very different. Knowing the profitability was there, knowing that what my interaction was. And then when I met with these interior designers and I said, they were like, well, what is your plan? And I said, well, my plan is to not disrupt this successful machine. I'm hoping all the staff is going to stay. I met with the
Mhm.
staff individually as well. Um, Not that that means anything, but I did. And I said, I'm going to keep everything the same, the lining, the vendors,
Right. We're
the
not all of a sudden
fabrication
going to order
methods.
cheap
Correct.
goods and
Correct.
save, cut corners, and the
Correct.
product quality is going to go down. And
Yes,
I'm firing three-quarters of the staff, and your lead times are going to quadruple, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I felt really strong about it. I said, I think it's good. And and she and I had an agreement, and then we sat down at the table with the attorneys, and her attorney like started rattling off all of these things that were not what we had agreed upon. And
Interesting.
that was in May of 2014. And I looked at the owner and I said, what's going on? This is not what we had discussed. And the lawyer said, just because the two of you discussed it didn't mean that that's what was going to happen. And I responded and said, last time I checked, she's the owner of her business.
Yeah.
So, and I just looked at her and said, you and I both know that there aren't people knocking down doors to purchase workrooms. You and I both know that. I feel like a higher power brought us together. You were ready to leave. I was looking for something bigger. I said, but I'm walking away. I'm sorry this couldn't work out, but this isn't what we agreed to. And I walked away. And my
Right. You got
lawyer
to
and
do
my
the takeaway.
accountant, yeah, they were like, good for you. And I said, well, come on. No,
Right.
I'm not doing it. Not. So then about a week went by and she called me and said, everything was fine until we got the men involved. I said, well, not all the men, because my two,
Yeah, your side.
yeah, they were men and they were on the same page. And so then I said, you know what? I'm interested, but the terms have changed. So I renegotiated.
I love it.
Yeah, just because. So originally, I'll be very honest. So
Go ahead.
originally, she wanted 600 for the business. That was her one highest gross sales,
Yeah, well,
not
that
net
was a
gross.
pie in the
Yeah.
sky. Yeah, that we knew that
Yes.
was
And so I
silly.
said, well, that's not, but we did the numbers and whatever, and the agreement was $350,000.
Okay.
I was going to put 20% down. She was going to be the bank, and
Oh,
I was going to pay her 7% interest over 5 years. That was the
okay.
agreement that she and I had agreed upon. Now, I mean, I probably had, $40,000, $50,000 in equipment, and probably, I don't know, 75, $80,000 in inventory.
Mm.
So that number seemed very reasonable to myself and John, and
Right. So
doable.
basically, you take this 50 and 75, you take 125 off of 350. That's what you're actually paying for the business. The other was
Correct.
goods. Okay.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
So
that you're
knowing
right.
if it doesn't work, I can sell all these things and maybe recoup some of
Yes.
my money.
Not a
So,
heart attack. Right.
yes,
Well, what did she come to the table with? Because that was what the agreement was. How did that lawyer come to the table, and what did
I
he say differently?
and so then she was going to the other part of that agreement was that I would pay her for 3 months, her current salary.
Okay.
And the first 3 months, she had to work 40 hours a week. Like, I needed her because there were, all these things I didn't know. I mean,
Right.
let's just say
Right.
this,
Right.
and you know how the ebb and flow works.
Right.
Some orders were placed, some estimates were out there. I needed her to be there to button that
Transition,
up.
right?
Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
exactly. Smooth it over with clients and make sure that this is this contract and this is the part I forgot to write in the silly contract with the order. Like, you know what we do. We write down what we're doing.
Exactly.
We're like, "Oh, that's right. I said that would I do that too." Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so, and that was also part of the agreement. And then the second 3 months, so I would pay her for 6 months. First 3 months was mandatory. Second 3 months was at my discretion. Whether I wanted her to come in or not to come in, I'd continue to pay her because I needed to know that I had to kick the training wheels off at some point.
Right.
And if I had her in the driver's seat that entire 6 months, it would be really easy to not take the steering wheel. And so
Okay.
I wanted the ability to say, I mean, great, she wins. She's getting paid for not coming in, right? So
Yes, right.
there
Good.
was
I
no
love that.
argument
I
there.
love that you thought about that.
He wanted to change it to, he wanted to change the sale price. That was the first thing, was that he wanted to change the sale price. He wanted to, I believe, I can't remember all the details of it, but decrease the loan payback and increase the interest rate. Wanted me to pay her for a year, no matter what. And then after that, any phone call that I had to make was a minimum of $300. $100 an hour, but a minimum of 3 hours. I said,
He
so
thought
if
he was
I
selling
call
a
her,
neurosurgery practice.
exactly. So I was just like, okay, whatever. You've done such a disservice to your client today. But so anyway, my counter offer. So after she approached it, I said, I didn't say okay. I just said I need to think about it, and I'll get back to you. And I did, and I called my CPA, and I just said, she called and wants to revisit it. And I said, but you know what? I don't think I want to do those terms anymore. And she's like, okay, well, what are you thinking? So I said, I don't want her holding the note. I'm going to take a loan out to pay for it myself. I said, I don't think I want her involved in it. I don't think it's going to be a healthy situation for her to have that any type of involvement in it for 5 years. I
Wow.
said, so I think I'm going to hold the note. And I said, and with that, I'm going to decrease the offer by 100 grand.
Oh my God.
And so he said, you sure you want to do that? I said, what do I have to lose? I said, we had a really
Right.
good thing. And I said, and now that I'm thinking about it even more and more and more, and I poured my heart into it for a year. So I was like, I felt
Yeah.
like I like fell off a building right
Yeah.
after I picked up and moved away from that conference table. Like my legs were shaking. Everyone was ready to celebrate, and I had to say, yeah,
Yeah.
no, we didn't do it. And they're like, what are you talking about? This has been going on for 8 months. So I think I just got a little bit of, oomph in me to
Yeah,
be like,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I'm taking the lead on this now. And she agreed.
Well,
So
good for you. Like,
yeah,
here's the thing, because now she's getting her money up front, right?
yes,
It's kind of like the
yes,
lottery. Do you want to take your
yes,
money over 100,000 years? You want to take it in a lump sum. If you take it
yes,
in a lump sum, it's less money, right?
correct.
And so your logic is sound. And I love that you did it. Okay. I love that you did it. And I love that, it's based in sound business logic. And, I'm glad that she did it too, because, it really was better for her to just get the money and go away. Just go do whatever you're going to do, right? And
Yes,
I think she probably also learned her lesson. Like she said, oh, the men involved. But to your point, it was the one man involved. And it could have been a woman. It was just a lawyer who was out of touch with that's what it sounds like to me. Your CPA was in the weeds on you know, the investigating the business for so long. You were side by side with her for 8 or 9 months, learning about her relationship, her clients, her business, her employees. And this lawyer just comes in and crafts some like Richard Gere Pretty Woman type deal, like out of the blue. It's like, this is not a hostile takeover. Like, what are you doing? Right?
you're gonna love this piece. He then called my lawyer and said, you're not even gonna believe this.
Oh, he
My
totally, I'm like right there. I'm like, I
my
can
lawyer
answer.
called me and said, "Okay, I'm gonna tell you this, and I don't
Oh,
want you to lose your mind."
yeah, I'm gonna lose
Because
mine right now.
he's a neighborhood guy. Like, he knows we all live in Dorchester, so he knows my husband and his family. So he
Ah,
literally called my lawyer and said, Julie's being a little unreasonable. I think it's time to get Tom involved.
I knew you were gonna say
Yes,
something
yes,
like that.
he did. And this
Oh
guy's
my
my age. He's like younger
god.
than me. And
Ah,
we both cracked up, and I just said, "What did you tell him?" And he said,
yeah.
"Well, clearly you don't know Tom and Julie. If you think that Tom and Julie didn't make all of these decisions together as a partner, then
Exactly.
yes,
Yeah,
and
and that Julie
no."
needs Tom to come talk for her.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So the ladies can go reside in the kitchen while the men take their cigars and retreat to the living room to discuss
Oh my
business. I
god.
know. I was just like, "Oh,
Oh my god.
get me away from this."
It's
So yes,
crazy, isn't it? I think
it
it's
is.
time to get Tom involved.
You did
See,
that. That's a quote. That is a
that
quote.
see, that's the kind of thing that just like, I mean, I'm telling you, I look like a cartoon. It's like I am like the Wile E. Coyote. My head pops off. I'm screaming, I'm yelling, and he's like, "Calm down! Don't you tell me to calm
Yeah,
down!"
yeah, exactly.
He didn't know
Exactly.
what he meant. He knew exactly what he meant when he said
Yes.
it.
And Tom is, like I said about you and Vin earlier before we hopped on air, like, Tom is the yin to my yang. Like,
Yeah,
I am up here, like,
yeah.
spiraling all the time, but taking charge and doing this and doing that. And Tom's just the gentle giant,
That's
you
it.
know.
Moving
So,
along, getting it
so the
done.
fact that he thought that that would even occur was very comical. But the whole process was exhausting, like,
Yeah.
thinking that this was happening and then having feeling like the floor was ripped out from under me because
Oh,
it was literally 8, 9 months of every day, like, figuring it
yeah,
out, doing this, trying to keep running my business while scheduling all these crucial appointments with her to make
right.
sure that my face was seen and to get a sense and what was the vibe like and what were these designers like. And I'm walking into some of these homes and I'm like, "Oh, this is where I want to be. This
This
is
is the
this is a
deal.
good
Yeah.
this is a good move."
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And so in the end, I mean, I have to assume that it was, in hindsight, it was a great decision, that
Yes.
you are a capable person and you could have built your business up by renting a space and all of that. But buying her business, when you look back, it was worth it. Like, in other words, that
Oh,
investment that you did, as opposed to like, let me just dig it out and build my own business up. You felt like that was a positive for you.
for sure, absolutely. And just to follow up on it, so right after the 3-month mark, I said,
See you buy.
"I'll give you a call if I have a question." But it wasn't her, it was me. Like, I was always taking the back seat out
Yes.
of comfort, out of fear. And so I was like, okay, I this needs to and I
Yeah.
wanted to have her available, so I wanted to do it within that second 3-month time frame so that I'd
Yeah.
have her as a resource in
Yes.
case I needed her, but I
Well,
did
it's
do that.
true. I mean, it's so funny because, we sold Window Works, a year and a half, 2 years ago, whatever it is, to our daughter and our son-in-law. And, Vin and I have got to stay away from the building because, especially now it's much better, but especially the first year. Like, if I had a nickel for every time Vin or I said to somebody, "I'm not sure, ask JC," they'd be like, "Wait, what?" We're like, not our call any longer. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? When you're there and you're present, and even JC for probably 6 months to a year would consistently say, "What do you think I should do here? What do I think?" And then finally, we were very well advised and coached by both my cousin Eileen Hahn and Jessica Harling to start saying, "What do you think?" Right? "What do you think?" And Vin and I were like, "Huh, that's a very smart way to approach this."
Mhm.
Because, you do something for 40 years, you're just like, "What you should do is this, you should do is that, and this is that." And like, "I'll take that call, I'll do that thing," right? But when we started changing from not being as present for all the employees and saying the phrase to JC, "What do you think?" Now what happens is he would spit back what he thinks, and legit 8 out of 10 times you're like, "Yeah, that's a good idea, I would do the same." But the 2 times it's like, "Well, here's another point of view on it, right? But the idea, to your point, you're in her location, her employees are there, her previous clients are coming in, and 3 months is not a long time for anybody to make a transition. And I can tell you what I'm saying from experiences, the transition would be as long as you allowed it, as long as
Yes.
the other owner is there. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And
Yeah.
I learned that very quickly. And
Yeah. Good
again,
for you.
it was all about me. It wasn't like she was overpowering.
No.
She was definitely struggling a little bit. I mean, this was her baby for 28 years. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? And I give her so much credence for that. But I was like, okay, I need to do this, or I could
Yeah.
continue like this forever, just
Yeah.
as you said, because
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
easier. And,
Yeah.
sometimes making decisions are difficult and you don't
Yes.
want to do it, but
No,
you
it's
have to.
hard, right? It's
Yes.
like
Yes.
everything's on the line now. And if you
Yes.
know somebody's standing around in the room that has made that decision 15 times before, why wouldn't you ask them, right?
Correct.
But you
Correct.
gotta exercise the critical thinking skills to go through the process, as opposed to just asking and getting an answer. And that
Yes.
was the big thing that we were taught by both Eileen and Jessica is, you're giving fish as opposed to teaching to fish. So
Mhm.
start asking them to think critically to come up with the solutions.
Yeah. Great
So
advice for
yeah.
sure. Yes.
So she just retired. She was just
Yes. She retired. She moved to Georgia, St. Simons, Georgia. Her daughter was there.
yeah.
And yeah. And so I used to keep in touch with her. I would send her like updates and then I never wasn't getting responses. So I said, okay, she's done, which was fine. Right. I get it. I understand. It was probably difficult, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
because any change that was made, and honestly, I can't, it was a while before I made any significant changes to anything. Change is hard. It's like when someone moves into your old house and then you
Yes.
rip out the kitchen, they're like, there's nothing wrong with that kitchen. We love that kitchen. Why did they do that? So same type of thing.
I know.
And in my opinion, if it ain't broke, why fix it?
Right.
You know,
Right.
I
Right.
just use this analogy about this restaurant that my husband and I loved. We could walk to it, would go like at least once a week. And then new buyers came in, they changed everything, every
Oh.
single thing, the entire menu, everything. And we
Oh,
gave it a shot 3, 4, 5 times. And I said, yeah.
that's it. We don't
I
have to
said,
come
why
here
would you do
again.
that? This business was there for 15 years, thriving. You bought it
Yes.
because it was a thriving business. And then you
Yeah.
automatically change it all. Why? To
Right.
put your thumbprint on it? I
Right.
just will never understand
No.
that
No.
approach to buying someone else's business. But anyway,
Right. And you can do things over time. You can make improvements over time. It's so funny because about 6 or 8 months ago, JC said to us, Vinny and I still go to the management partner meetings every week, right? And we don't really speak a lot in them. We observe. They just the management team wants us kind of hovering around a little bit, right? And I don't know, 6 or 7 months ago, one of them was like, okay, so next on the agenda, the revision of the Window Works logo. And Vinny and I both just like we went, what? And we're just like, and I'm just like looking at them. They're like, well, I think it's a little outdated, da 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 da. And I was just like sitting there. It was like, it's like, I don't know. You take your kid and you're like, I'm gonna dye my kid's hair. Like, no, this, like you said, it's my baby. I'm like, it's outdated? And they're like, well, it's 40 years old. I'm like, it's actually 30 years old. It was changed 10 years in. And JC looks at it, he goes, my point. And I'm like,
yes.
all
Oh,
right.
yeah. Yeah.
So, but it was
It did
funny.
its time. It did its
Yeah.
time. It served
Yeah.
its purpose.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But
Yes.
it was funny. He kept roping me into the redesign meetings. What do you think of
Oh.
this? I'm like, please stop asking me these things. Just change it to however you want. I'm just like, la, 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 la.
That's funny.
I'm
But
like,
yes, there's a very
yeah,
clear example of what I
yeah,
was just
yeah,
talking about. So that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever you do, I'm going to love it. It's going to be one of those things where a week later, it'll just be what it should be. But don't ask me to help you change it.
Oh, so
So
good.
funny, right? So the thing is, I know my experience with you in every conversations, whether it's been, chats at IWCE or through the WCAA, it's so clear to me that you are business driven, that you are acutely aware of your numbers, that you are aware of setting profit margins and running a good business. Julie, was that a part of your nature and a part of as an occupational therapist? Were you your own business within? Were you a consultant, or you shake? She's
I'm
shaking her head.
shaking my
No,
head.
right?
No.
So you learned it the hard way, like most of us.
I learned it the hard way. And I'm a true believer in the sense that I feel like a lot of people in our industries, designers, window treatment professionals, we are such creatives that our brain does not automatically go there. It has
Right.
always been the missing link for me, always. And, um, you know, I just listened to your most recent podcast with Michelle
Mm,
Williams, and it was talking about, not wanting to have to ask, can I buy a second van? Can I hire my own installer? Can I hire another seamstress? So, but I will say in my defense that I was on a hamster wheel. The exponential growth that took place from when
mm,
I purchased this business until now. I mean, from 2014 until 2018, I was still doing every measure, checking it, doing every estimate,
whoa,
checking in every fabric, writing every
whoa,
work order, going
whoa,
on every install. Yes.
wow.
And I don't recommend that to anyone. Um, I didn't know any better. I
Right.
didn't know any better. And once I got my staff in place, so when I purchased it, we had three fabricators. That was it,
Mhm,
and a
mhm,
couple of installers, 1099s.
mhm.
We now have 12 employees.
Wow,
Yeah, we have six fabricators. We could
wow.
probably use another one. Um, you know, to, a a COO, a window treatment specialist, two like a workroom tech that splits between the workroom and the back office where the fabric
Mm,
gets checked in and all the items get inspected, and another administrative assistant. We just had a paid intern over the summer, which
mm.
was great. Um, so it's grown quite a bit. And as you know, that in itself.
His head spinning.
Yes. Like knowing that you need assistance, but not knowing. So I remember I was approached by someone from the WCAA, our local chapter. I had offered, Elke was coming to do a Roman shade fabrication class at my workroom. And so I reached out to one of the WCAA members that used to sub some of her work out to me. And she said, actually, I haven't told you yet, I'm moving to Florida, but and I just don't want to say anyone's names in case they don't want to be on the
Right,
podcast.
sure.
But so she said, can so and so come instead? She works with me. I said, oh, absolutely. I love her. So she came. She didn't understand. She thought she didn't understand that I had hired Elke to come. Like, I don't think she knew. So when she
Okay.
got there, she was like, oh, it's just for you and your staff. Well, thank you for letting me come. She reached out to me like 2 weeks later and said, are you looking for help? And I thought she meant fabrication help. She's like, I think you could use some like administrative help.
Wow.
And I said, sure. If you're willing to be flexible and come and let's just see how it goes, and we'll be very transparent with each other. And um, so that was my first. And then she wasn't there 6 months, and she's like, you need a mini you. You need another
Yes.
person that's
Yes.
going on doing the measures, doing this, doing that. So I reached
Yeah.
out to another local WCAA chapter member whom I always loved, had seen her in the Boston Design Center a couple of times. So I called her and she said, you won't even believe it. I'm on vacation. I was just floating in an inner tube. And I said to my husband, I'm sick of chasing the work. So she
Wow.
said, can I call
That's
you next week? And so then
yeah.
she's been with me since
Wow.
2019. And then
Isn't
I have
that
another
awesome?
local chapter WCA member who I hounded to come work for me. She was working for herself, then working for the Shade Store. I met her at Horizons conference at one of their on the road shows. And I said, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm working for the shade store." And I was like
Ugh,
slapping her. "What are you
that's
talking
it.
about?
What do
Come
you
work for
mean?
me."
Like, don't
But it was
sell
the
out.
commute. It was the commute for her because she
Yeah,
lives a good hour and 10 minutes away. And I said, "Just try it. You can have flexible hours. If it doesn't work, then you don't have to stay." And I think
yeah.
that was almost 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow.
So, I've kind of it's been nice, like you mentioned the WCAA, and yes, I've been a member for a long time and I've made a lot of good friends, um and they're the ones that I reached out to and said, "You want to work for me?"
Well, and that
So,
is the thing, right? I mean, that is one of the biggest values of the WCAA. All the education, all the resources, all of that, but it is the network. It's the people, and the thing what I love about it is it could be people that you know, but it doesn't need to be people that you know, right? It's like
correct.
you're a member, I'm a member, can I pick your brain, or do you know somebody that this, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yes.
like, and it just is an automatic open door, right? That's the thing. It's an automatic open door. So
Yes.
I love that.
It's been great. Yes.
I love that.
So, yeah. So
So
anyway, back to me and my numbers.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
I always looked at them. I never understood them. All
No,
I
I
knew
get
was
it.
that we were profitable. When I needed the
Mhm.
second van, I could buy the second van.
Mhm.
When we needed another fabricator, I could get another fabricator.
Mhm.
Um, if we had a lull, like when COVID hit,
Yeah.
the day that Governor Baker shut everything, gave the date that everything was getting shut down in Massachusetts, I had a $30,000 job taken from me and a $40,000 job taken from me.
Mm.
And I get it because the designers didn't have anything tangible in their hands, right? They
Yes.
didn't know, was I going to survive
Right.
or what was I going to do? I respected it. I understood it. They took their money back. They took whatever fabrics had been delivered. I called my husband and said, I might lose this business.
I
Who
know.
the
We all
heck?
made that call.
Who's
We
going
all
to
made that
buy
call.
custom window treatments
Right.
when there's a pandemic going on?
Little did
And
we know.
sent everyone home for 2 weeks to quarantine. We did have jobs that needed to be finished and said, we have staggered shifts. By then, we had expanded to 4,500 square feet of space. We had
Wow.
knocked through one wall, like, 3 years after I bought it. And then, anyway, so I said, everyone has their own equipment. We can do staggered shifts. The average age of my employees is older than me, so they wanted
Wow.
to work. They didn't want to
Yeah.
stay home.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that
And
funny? It
then,
was very generational.
yes. And then, boy, nothing but the opposite occurred.
I know
Nothing
we
but the
were all
opposite
out of
occurred.
our
Yes.
minds.
Yes.
Who's gonna
Yes.
want window treatments in a pandemic? Everybody.
Everybody. Everybody.
Every blasted
Yes.
person.
Yes. Yes.
That's it.
Thankfully, right? I mean, how
Right.
fortunate were we
Ah,
as an industry
we
to
were.
have
Our
thrived
industry
in
was on
such a
this positive
tumultuous
side. But
time.
yeah,
Yes.
no, it
So
was. It was
grateful.
because it really was just a flip of the coin. Whatever industry you were in, one industry went down and another industry thrived. There was no you could never have predicted that. No rhyme or
Yes.
reason to that. It's just
Now
crazy.
I was very jealous of all the people that were having all of this quality family time. I didn't, painting and puzzles. Yeah, I didn't get to do that. I'd go home and one of my kids would be like, "Do you like the puzzle we did
Oh
today?"
my
I'm like,
God.
"Yeah, that's great. I would have loved
That-
to have been home, but guess what? No, it was another 12-hour day."
exactly.
But it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good. Yes.
So where are gross sales at that you took this business over? What have you grown it up to?
Yes, so hoping to get to about 3 million this year.
Whoa, Julie.
Yeah.
Holy crow.
I don't know about you. Things have kind of come to a little bit of a right
Yeah, yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
now.
100%.
But we did 2.5 last year.
Good for you.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
And I'm only saying it. If anyone that knows me, it's never been about the money. I mean,
Right.
Roger McGallis. We kind of
Sure.
came up the ladder together. We both met at our local WCAA chapter, and we became good friends
Mhm.
and really good business, like, bouncer
Besties.
offers
Yeah.
over the years. Never mind, and then my business grew, his business grew. He couldn't install for me anymore, and all that goes. But I don't know. It's I was saying that anybody that knows me, like it's never about if something gets ordered wrong or something, it's about how quickly can we replace it so that the client is happy. That's
Yes.
always what it's about for me. It's not about,
But
okay,
that's
well,
why the
that's,
business has grown.
it
But
is.
that's
Yeah,
exactly
it
why,
is. It
right?
is.
You're not like,
It is.
oh, well, I have to spend $25 more to make you happy. Forget it. Like those are the
Exactly.
businesses that strangle themselves. And I know it's not $25. It's typically $2,500.
Yes,
But like
correct.
do it. Do the right
Exactly.
thing, you know? That's
Yeah,
that's an
and
incredible accomplishment, Julie. $2.53 million.
thank
Good for
you.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It's come with some blood, sweat, and tears for
Sure.
sure. It's been a lot of hard work. And again, I'm not throwing the numbers around. I just want it.
Well, I asked you. You're not
Yes, you did.
showing
Yes,
off. I
yes,
asked
yes,
you.
you did. You did. Yes, you did. And I hired Michelle 2 years ago. I reached out to her and said, now I'm at a place, I have people doing things for me, that I'm not not strangling myself anymore. Now it's time. I mean, I refer back to the podcast that the two of you just did because I could
Yeah.
relate to you so
Yep.
much, LuAnn, during the whole thing. Like, yes, I'm successful. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But if I don't know and I can't make these answers myself, well, shame on me. And
Right.
so then, and
Yeah.
it was a big investment, but I kept saying, I'm investing this in myself. I
That's
mean,
right.
that's what I'm doing right now. And
It's like buying
yeah,
peace of mind. It's buying it's not just peace of mind. I shouldn't say that. For many people it will be buying the knowledge and the peace of mind, right? And so for me, and I explained to you guys on the show, I expected it to be more percentage knowledge than peace of mind, and it turned out to be more percentage peace of mind than knowledge. But
yes,
when your knowledge sits next to Vin Nigara, you're never going to say, I got this. Right. And
right,
I don't mean that because he's not unkind about it, but it's his superpower. His superpower is finances and projections and money and, all of that stuff. And he can do it in his head, for crying out loud. He'll sit there and he'll be like, well, if I take 62 well, that'd be a 22% increase and it would only cost you 15K. And I'm like, okay, sweetie, get the napkin out, move my wine over because I'm not following.
right,
you know,
right.
but when you put it out for me, what's so funny is I can't tell you the number of times where I've come up with something and I say, let me run this by you, Nigara. And he's like, what? And I'm like, this is what I'm thinking. And I'm going through, and his eyes are glazing over. And he's just like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, I'm just saying if the investment costs this much and I'm willing to do that, and this is where the projection is, and and I'll get all the way. I'm like, what? And I'm like, this is how much it costs. This is how much I think the ROI is going to be. He's like, okay, because you could have just did da 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 da. And I'm like, no, see, I had to take the trip with the pail up to the thing and down. And if I roll fast and I go slow, then it all equals this. Like
Yes,
he just, so it's, you
he has a
have to
different
buy it.
brain. He
He
has a different
does.
brain. He has a
He
different
does.
brain.
He
Yes.
does. And it's just sitting next to that brain all the time. I
Well, it's
always
okay to
second
take
my
the
guess.
pail and go up to the
Right.
well. There's nothing wrong with
Exactly.
that. You're making the trip and you're coming back with what
Exactly.
you had to. That's your process. That's how you have to
Exactly.
do it. And there's nothing
Exactly.
wrong with that. But there is
Exactly.
something wrong with not
Not
knowing it.
knowing. Yes.
And,
Yes.
I'll speak for workrooms because I mean we sell hard treatments as well,
Yes.
but I think obviously my business model and WindowWorks business model was very different
Sure.
because I'm doing the actual
Yeah, we don't
fabricating.
fabricate. Yep.
Yes, I just think that there isn't enough emphasis on how important knowing the business part of the business is, no matter if you're home based or not. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
proud of myself that 2 years in, I hired a bookkeeper once a week to come
Good
in.
for you.
And she was really the catalyst that she was kind of like coaching me along and you're doing awesome and this is great. And I'd always be like, is it? Because I don't
Yeah.
know. Like
Yeah.
what's a good profit margin in this industry? I have no idea. So she
Right.
did a little research. So I'd always be like, oh, okay, whatever. But it's really important. And I
It
knew
is.
right away that's my weakness. I'm going to hire a professional. But we always went over everything,
Yeah.
and I might not have retained it or processed it like she did, but I
Exactly.
always knew that okay, this is profitable. And these are
Mhm.
the reasons that it's profitable because of this number and that number, and knowing where it comes from. Like, even just knowing the difference between what we're making, what percentage of our gross sales is hard treatment based
Right. You
versus
need to
fabrication
know
based.
that.
You do.
You
You
do. You
do.
have to. Well, and it's so funny because over the last several years, I mentioned to you off air, when Vinny and I took over Exciting Windows 3.5 years ago, there were no workrooms as members of Exciting Windows. We must have 10 or 12 now, I would think, at this
That's
point.
great.
And as soon as we got like the second or third one, Vinny was like, up. I got to go, just what you said about the bookkeeper. He's like, I got to go out and get the data for the workroom model. I got to figure it
Mhm.
out. And he had conversations with Peggy Morgans about it.
Mhm.
He had conversations with Steve Landis about it. I don't know who else he reached out to, but he then put together the model, the business model for what your percentages should be for different things, because it's it
It's
is
different. It's
it's a
different.
unique business model within the industry,
It
and you
is.
cannot talk to a retailer and talk to them about cost of goods and cost of fabrication in the same way you do a workroom. But he was very committed to making sure that there was a place for workrooms, and also, a place for whether it's a workroom or a retail business. If your gross sales are $250,000 a year, or your gross sales are $15 million a year, there's a place there, and we break that out, because when you are, say, up to $750,000 a year in sales, 99% of the time the owner is the salesperson.
Mhm.
And so even that throws off. It throws off the compensation packages, both for owner and for employees. All the percentages change, and you just can't talk one line to everybody. And so, but I think when you know that 3 years ago a 17-year-old company had no workrooms in it, and now it has 10, 12, 15. I know that the workroom mentality is changing to be profitable, right? And because the previous workroom mentality, more so than a lot of us, but all of us fall into this at some point usually, is the e-myth, right? The e-myth, where
I
it's like
do.
the
I've read it like
technician.
4 times.
Yeah, the technician starts a business,
Mhm.
but the technician is not a manager, and the technician is not an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean that the technician doesn't generate money. It doesn't mean that the technician isn't in the black. It doesn't mean any of those things. And that is the the golden handcuffs on that technician,
Mhm.
because then they're managing their business from the checkbook, what it says as a balance, but not from the way Michelle teaches us and Vinny teaches us, as projections versus costs coming up, and revenues that we're expected to make, and whether we hit it or we don't hit it, it's going to change all of the numbers, right? And so when a technician stays in their technician role and makes money, but doesn't pick up and look at their manager role, that's when, you know, I end up calling it money laundering. Like when I do my live presentations, you're bringing the money in and the money is going out, but you're not amassing it in the middle. It's not converting into creating wealth, right? Being able to
Correct.
buy buildings, to invest in your, IRAs, or whatever whatever your desire is. And
I
when
was
you
guilty of that. I was
Yeah,
guilty
all
of
of
that
us.
when I was working at home, like, working in my one because I didn't know any better and I was just happy that there was
Yeah,
money in the
there was
bank.
money in the
You know
bank,
what I mean?
right?
That was it. It was like, "Okay,
That's
I
it.
must be profitable. There's money in the
Exactly.
bank." But it's
You
like,
are not
"Hmm."
alone. You are not
Yeah,
alone. I would
yeah,
tell you probably 80% of all business owners across all industries have that period of time in their
yeah.
life. Listen, I've done 1,400 interviews between the two shows. The only people that I have ever interviewed that started their business with that mentality, that numbers mentality that Vinny and Michelle and others have, are people that have come from finance backgrounds,
Mhm,
or they have already burnt a business. They've built a business and burnt it, and then what went wrong? And it's like,
mm.
oh, I just did my craft. I didn't do the business part. And so, but otherwise, almost every single person has told me, I didn't do this at first. I
Yeah.
didn't do this at first. But my good news is that it's impossible not to see the fact that we have so many workrooms in EW. It's impossible not to relate that with workrooms now saying, hey, 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 I can run this out of my basement, but it still has to be a business.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
that's the only reason you come to EW is to learn how to run the business side. I mean, that's
right.
our whole point of view there. We're not going to teach you how to make a Roman shade. I got news for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, no.
So
And it's just really so important. And
yeah,
if I could give any advice about, whether we started out about me buying a business, and my whole premise that I wanted to get, it was like, I never knew that a drapery workrooms existed. And then I found out that and fell in love with it. And then, here I am buying someone else's business, and you just see it in the Facebook groups, this, that, or the other. People were closing our doors, looking to sell
yeah,
this, looking to sell that. And, wouldn't it be great if you have this business, and if there's not a family member like you were blessed to have that wants
hmm
to step into it, then that someone could buy it and not
yeah,
reinvent the wheel, and then maybe turn that business into another growing
right.
enterprise. But it's not the mentality. I don't
No,
think. I
yes.
really don't. And I
No,
don't
and
think
that's
I
what we're
want
trying to change. We're
it
trying to
is.
change
It
that. And
really
by the way,
is.
we didn't give our business to our kids. Girl, I worked 40
Correct.
years for
Yes.
that business.
Yes. No, it's true. It's
It's the
true.
retirement money, right?
It really
So,
is. It's
yeah.
really true. And then the other piece of it is, if I could do it all over again, obviously, is, someone congratulated me last year. I'm in a couple of masterminds. I'm in
Yep.
one with Amy Baradell and Peg Morgans, and then another one with Vita and Leslie and Nikki and
Nikki, yeah.
Jill Blue.
Jill.
Yeah, so Jill Blue we had met on the board, and then she's the one that kind of put the WCA board, and then she kind of put this group together and asked me if I'd be willing, and I was thrilled. But someone congratulated me on, oh my gosh, that's so great. And I said, you know what? If it wasn't goal based, and it wasn't purposeful growth, so it doesn't feel like a success.
Mm.
So this past year, I will say, because I've been working with Michelle for 2 years now, I hired Jessica Harling to help fill the holes of the administrative things, like our
Mm.
policies and procedures that aren't documented, or this, that,
Mhm.
and the other. I mean, that's just been an amazing investment as well. But I feel proud of it this year
It's
because it
different.
was purposeful. It is very
Yes.
different.
That
It is
is the
very
difference.
different.
That is
Yes.
that over the other side, right?
Yes.
You own the knowledge, you know how to look at the numbers, and you know that you set a goal, and each month you're marking, am I on track for that goal? Am I falling behind? As opposed to just getting at the end of the year and going, okay, well, we're in the black again. Yay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very different, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Michelle and I set up in Matrique, we set up
Yes.
what my goals were for expenses and sales and, profitability. And it's really great to plug the profit and loss numbers and the balance sheet numbers in there every month to see on my pie chart and my graph chart that, all right, yes, we did it. We did it another month.
I love
There
it.
might be a month that we didn't, and then you're like, okay, well, let's look. What
Yeah.
what what was it? Was it this? Was it that? Let's compare it to the last 2 years. What did that look like? Because I have
Right.
my data from QuickBooks since I started the business, and now I get excited about that.
I
Whereas
know.
before I never did that, but now it's very telling. It's very telling, and knowledge is power, and it's very empowering
It's
as
so
a
funny
business
because
owner
on
for
the other
sure.
podcast, A Well-Designed Business, for years, been having this conversation about understand your numbers and your finances and you have to you have to know enough. I don't really ever advocate that anybody is not a numbers person to be their own bookkeeper, but you have to know enough to monitor the bookkeeper. If you're just blindly trusting the bookkeeper, Houston, we have a
Mm,
problem, right? And that's
hmm.
where Michelle comes in, helping you and helping you teaching that to us and helping us understand it. But what happens is it's become a thing on that podcast to call it Finance Friday because we started talking about like on Mondays are team meetings and Tuesdays are site meetings and Wednesdays are client meetings and Thursdays are this and Fridays we meet with our bookkeeper. And so one designer said it on a show and another, and then so all of a sudden somebody coins the phrase finance Friday, and now over there it's just a thing. It's like, it used to be, if I had a nickel for every designer said, it used to be that I hated and like was drudgery looking that the meeting was on the calendar with the bookkeeper. And now it's like, and now I can't wait for Finance Friday to meet with the bookkeeper and look at the pie charts and see this and make sure that. So
It's so true. I've been converted. I've
that's,
been converted.
that's what I said.
I drank
You
the
become an
Kool-Aid.
evangelist once you turn it
Yes,
over, right?
yes,
You
I
do.
drank the Kool-Aid.
So,
I'm so
but
grateful.
anyway, it's just been great. I have just so appreciated your, sharing all this, Jewel. There's lots of things in here that I didn't know. So that was fun to learn. And I just love that, you're a badass. Like, don't go to her with a bad deal.
And again, I only said it because, yeah, I was like, yeah, no,
Never
I have
mind.
nothing to lose at this point. I got up
Right.
and walked away from the table.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I am going to take the reins on this one, and
I
it
love
all
it.
turned out great.
I love it. I love
Yes.
it. Thanks so much for joining me today, Julie.
Thanks, LuAnn. It's been a great. Thanks.